breaking down 9,900 green horses in HO scale, an SD45, an SD40, and a U33C in this episode of Black Hills and Eastern Railroad. Today we're taking a look at Burlington Northern's Hustle Muscle and her friends using 1960s locomotive technology. It is the second half of the 1960s, and President Johnson is presiding over the war in Vietnam, the creation of the dumpster fire that was Penn Central, civil rights movement, the race to the moon.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
The Cold War, and a three-way struggle for dominance in the North American locomotive market. Venerable locomotive builder Alco was trying to keep the vultures at bay. Upstart locomotive maker GE, or General Electric, was trying to capture more locomotive market. And EMD was already the leader, with only a few years out from an entire decade of unquestioned dominance over the market with the introduction of their Dash 2 line in 1972. So I'm going to ask you, in close observation of the engines in this video, what minor cosmetic defect seen easily in these pictures having to do with paint, art, and decals on one of these units will I update in a future episode. We'll walk through each one of these individual locomotives in this 3-unit set and take a look at what I did to make each one of these HO scale models special. The Burlington Northern 6430 is an SD45 built in May of 1966 at LaGrange, Illinois by EMD. To put it in perspective, the SD45 was easily the most powerful locomotive, or most powerful diesel locomotive, when it arrived on Great Northern's property in 1966. The biggest 6-axle at the time was an SD9 rated at 1,750 horsepower, and there was a GP35 and a U33C BN at 2,500 horsepower. So, as you might imagine, this was a huge step up for Great Northern. That's why they dubbed the first SD45 the Hustle Muscle. Hustle Muscle lettering was developed in this to complement the artwork already done in the Empire Builder scheme that was applied to the locomotive. After the Burlington Northern merger in 1970, the unit was painted green and black, but white letters were applied to the unit to continue the Hustle Muscle designation of this SD45. The SD45 you see here and her 45 series sisters are powered by a 20-cylinder 645 turbocharged 3,600 horsepower EMD prime mover. EMD did have some issues with these out of the gate. That 20-cylinder prime mover is pretty long, and they did have some crankshaft issues owing to flex in the frame and possibly misalignment with the main generator. I've heard different stories about that, and if you'd ask my friend, operations manager Tim, he'd probably give you the lowdown on that, because he worked on one of the SD45s that's now up at Duluth. So let's take a look at my custom HO scale model of the 6430. One of the things you notice right away about this engine is that the handbrake is placed in the wrong position here. I may have fixed that if I had known better at the time, but I'm pretty happy with the engine as it is. This was done fairly early on in my paint and decal detail career. I didn't put the lift rings on the long hood. I probably wish I would have, and I may go back and do that. This is an example of one of the later production Kato locomotives in which they had the separately applied MU hoses on the both the front and rear pilot, and I believe at one time they did have the on the ends here the foot plates where a brakeman would ride. Those were mandated off, I think, in the mid-70s or so. Anyway, I did this using acrylic paints, green, I think probably Poly S, and Microscale decals. There is a decal set available for this engine, a mini cal that has the Hustle Muscle lettering in it, and of course the 6430. And you guys know that there's been quite a few production locomotives that have Athearn ready to run, and maybe even Scale Trains has a Hustle Muscle now, but I did this engine before anything was commercially available. Pretty happy with it. This engine is powered by, I believe, a DH163P decoder. This Kato locomotive came with a 8-pin quick plug, and I separately applied the rotary beacon, as I always have or normally do on these BN engines that require it. And below here, of course, is the green box that they come in. And you'll note that some of the early SD45s from Kato came with a window in. This is the example of the later box with the just the artwork on the top of the box here. So interestingly, and maybe embarrassingly enough, President Richard Nixon would get to preside over the moon landing in the summer of 1969.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Before our other two locomotives in this video are built. I'm considering these 60s technology even though they were built in the early 70s because they're basically all 60s engineering. By the time the U33C was built in 1971, the U-series technology was getting pretty long in the tooth. First, we'll take a look at the BN 6309. This unit was built in October of 1971 by EMD at LaGrange, Illinois. This engine featured a 16-cylinder 645 turbocharged 3,000 horsepower EMD prime mover. So looking specifically at my model, it's largely the same as the SD45 that we showed just now. And again, this was done early on in my paint and detail career, so there's maybe some things that could use some improvement here. I didn't put any lift rings on the top. I actually left the rotary beacon off because in this iteration of this locomotive, painted as it appears here today, I couldn't find any evidence to support that there should be a rotary beacon on there, so I left it off. For whatever reason, I left the footboards on. I can't explain that. I have no excuse for that. Whatever. I did add a snowplow to the front, and I believe this is another example of the later Kato locomotives where the MU hoses are separately applied. There's pre-drilled holes. I could be wrong about that. Those might be Decals West parts there. I don't remember. And this locomotive is pretty much bone stock other than that. Any eagle-eyed Burlington Northern fans or Colorado Southern fans will notice that the handbrake is also wrong on this one. This model shows a ratchet brake on the nose, and all the Burlington Northerns, the CNS, the Q units inherited by Burlington Northern had a brake wheel style handbrake on the end of the long hood here. And again, this is a more modern SD40. This is a model that would have had the 8-pin quick plug and came in a box with without the window. So there's some strong evidence to suggest that this is the longest lived locomotive in this group of three here. I believe it was retired in 2008 as Burlington Northern 6320. I'm not sure about that. Maybe somebody can provide some additional evidence on that, but this is a really cool engine and had a long history with the railroad. Now we are on to the U33C, the BN 5749. Built in September of 71 in Erie, Pennsylvania. It was powered by a GE FDL 16-cylinder 3,300 horsepower prime mover. You guys, this might be the most interesting HO scale model of this group of three, but it's probably the least interesting historically with the railroad. I find evidence to suggest that it was retired in February of '86 after only about 15 years of service on the railroad, and I believe these were probably dedicated to coal service out west. And I don't really think they were ridden hard and put away wet or anything. I don't think they were abused, but they just didn't hold up to the rigors of that particular type of service. And I don't think Burlington Northern was really an outlier among U33C customers either. I think most of them got the scrapper's torch after 15 or 20 years. There was a few of them that were heavily rebuilt and exported. So this particular HO scale model is an example of what modelers refer to as an Atlas Redbox unit. This is prior to the introduction of the Master Series and the Gold Series. This was a pretty good unit at the time, and really still is for that matter. The mechanism is bulletproof and runs smooth and quiet, as you'd expect any modern locomotive to. But I did have to do a few things to bring it up to spec, and I'll run you through those things here in a minute. So externally, the obvious things, I did apply the supplied wire grab irons, and I believe I supplied my own MU hoses, things like that. The pilots on these things are pretty plain and boring without doing some stuff and doing some extra detail work. Here you can see the cut lever is there. I believe that's factory supplied and modeler applied. Then I cosmetically darkened the radiator screens, the radiator inlets here on the rear of the locomotive on both sides. And I did a thing, and I'm not sure if history actually shows this or not, but I did plate over the windows, and I'm not sure if U33s actually got that treatment or not. I know for sure that C30-7s did. So I went ahead and followed suit on that. And what the deal on that is that GEs were supplied from the factory with these side windows. And at some point, FRA mandated that we have 100% bulletproof glass all around the cab. Burlington Northern found it cheaper just to plate over those windows rather than to apply bulletproof glass in those spots. So I've modeled that here and just painted green and black over those particular spots. And of course applied a snowplow, aftermarket snowplow, and painted the handrails here. And of course the factory or the aftermarket rotating beacon. And again, this locomotive is powered by a DH163 P. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly if this particular locomotive had a 8-pin plug or not in it. I know there's plenty of room for the decoder in here, and if it is without a 8-pin plug, this is probably one of the easier hardwire installs you'll ever see. And the reason for that is the motor will be already isolated. Your truck power pickups will be there, and then you can supply your own lighting, which I probably should have done because you've seen in the videos here that the headlighting is pretty dim. I'd maybe fix that at some point. Maybe that's another idea for an episode coming up at some point. The major work here with this locomotive is to tone down the copper pickup strips. And you guys all remember seeing pictures of these, that you can see the copper pickup strips behind the truck side frames. The pickup works almost the same exact way as a Kato does, or most modern locomotives, where you have that outboard bearing, I guess, where the pickup strip brings power from the wheels on the outside of the between the wheel face and the side frame, and then a wire goes up into the printed circuit board and onto the motor from there. So those are annoyingly brassy colored from the factory. I completely disassembled the trucks here, painted those black so they're not nearly so noticeable, and put everything back together. And I did, while I had this apart, it appears that I painted the wheel faces as well, just to tone down that shine from down below there. Also, I see that I have brass sunshades applied. Left the factory bell and the air horn where it was from the factory, and that'll about wrap up what I did with this locomotive. So if during this video you've picked up on that cosmetic revision that I'd like to make in another episode, leave us a comment below, and of course give us a comment if you've got any thoughts about these units or Burlington Northern in general. If you like the content here, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.
We choose to go to the moon in this detain and do the other things. Not because... Oh, I said detain, not decade.